Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning and welcome back to Faith in Our Hometown. Or if you're joining us for the first time, we're really glad that you've joined us for another Sunday morning, where we discuss different topics that kind of impact our lives as people here in the greater Joplin area and sometimes as people of faith. And so this morning we're going to be talking about just regular everyday life and the fact that still most of us believe, even if we don't have a particular belief system, that there are ways to treat people and ways not to treat people. And what's our responsibility toward them? Do we have responsibilities to treat each other in certain ways? Do we have a responsibility to think about how we live, if we want to use religious terms, a moral life? And so my guest this morning is going to be Nick Lund-Mulphacy. And Nicholas is works for the Diocese of Springfield-Cape Girardeau, so he's one of my Catholic colleagues. And so we're going to be right back to talk about the moral life and some of those issues in living a moral life. So we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Stay tuned, don't go away, and we'll be right back.
Once I quit playing football, I still kept up with the eating, the amount of calories I wasn't exercising, so the weight started adding on. Dr. Lou is very knowledgeable in the work he does. He also has a program set up that has support systems in place for you. You'll go through the seminar at first. He'll give you the different examples of surgeries you can have to see which one works best with you. He will also sit down with you and discuss the options, what he feels, but he'll work with you the entire time. Mercy has their gastric bypass program here. They have all kinds of resources and support systems in place. They want to see you succeed, and they're here to help you the entire time, even after the surgery.
Well, thanks for sticking with us. Again, my guest this morning is going to be Nicholas Lund-Mulphacy, who works for the Diocese of Springfield-Cape Girardeau. So that's, for all disclaimers, a Catholic outfit, okay? Kind of our Catholic corporate office here in Southern Missouri. And Nick's with us today to talk a little bit about the moral life and how we live out some of those issues in daily life. And I think we got a few things that we hopefully will spark a little thought for us this morning. So Nick, why don't you go and introduce yourself first to everybody and tell a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to get into this topic.
Well, thanks so much for having me on the show today.
No problem.
I appreciate it. I have, my wife is Christine. I have 7 wonderful children. I'm originally from Chicago, and I've lived
Please forgive him for that.
Yeah,
part. Okay.
right.
Yeah.
And I've lived in Springfield for about the past 7 years.
Great. Well, it's good to have you. We've worked together a lot, and so it is just good to have you here. I always enjoy our conversations. So
Thank you.
It's one of the reasons why I thought you'd be fun to just have on and to have some of this conversation. So why is it important that anybody live a life of treating people a certain way? Why is that important?
I don't think people realize how important they are. That usually you think the president's very important, the governor's important, but the person you encounter on your way to work, driving, the person, how you're treated at the cash register or at a restaurant, that has a bigger impact on my day, on my attitude, on my sense of even dignity than the president will. The president's far away. Mm-hmm. So every day we have a big impact on others' lives, for better or worse.
Yeah, well, one of the things I always tell my students when they're dating and all those kinds of things is I say, always pay attention to the way he treats waitresses, the way he treats people in the checkout counter, because then you're really going to truly see his temperament and what kind of a man he is. And same ways likewise for a woman. Absolutely. But those are always important things because I think that the way we do treat each other does matter a whole lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of living a moral life, we talked about a couple topics that we talk about. Like for example, let's just get into as a for instance, okay? So I talked about waitresses. Let's get into this whole business about tipping.
Right.
Now, there are some moral issues around the whole issue of how we treat the people who wait on us in a restaurant.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So American society is classless. So that's our theory anyway.
Right.
So in theory, we're all equal, but we end up in these situations that's very structured and layered. So you go to a restaurant, you're seated and you're served, literally is the term. You have a server, and their job is to serve you. And how do you treat people who are serving you? Do you treat them as servants, or do you recognize them as other human beings? So even just in the interaction itself, I always try to remind my kids to say please and thank you, just because it's their job to serve. And so it doesn't mean they're a servant. I think that's a line from there's a Fellini movie. That's the exact line, is that everyone's servant, served all, but no one's servant. And so to treat them still with a human being with dignity. And so you see service people, service workers, often mistreated because people can. They're having a bad day. There's a mistake, no fault of their own, and they take it out on the server.
Right.
As if that's part of the service.
Right, and again, that whole business about recognizing. Now, I as one who does service, I don't think that serving or being a servant is a bad thing, as long as there's no, judgment of worth involved.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I don't mind being somebody's servant. I mean, I do it all the time, and I don't see that as a bad word or a dirty word or anything. But I do get frustrated when people take advantage of me when I'm putting myself out there to serve in the first place.
Well,
and I'm sure that really comes in when you're doing that just as, for whoever walks in a door.
Exactly. Well, that's the difference. I think the Christian perspective says the greatest is the one who serves. And so that's an overturning.
The slave of all, but
exactly.
Let's not get into that terminology.
Right.
Woo.
But that exactly right is that that the language of the gospel is very strong. So the Christian mentality overturns. But how do you treat these people with respect? And we talked about tipping a little bit. It's one of the ways you interact. And tipping's interesting because it's actually included in the pay of most servers.
Right, and I don't think a lot of people really realize that.
Yes, they're paid a lower minimum wage.
Right,
or
they're
a
paid
service
way
wage.
below what somebody would get for minimum wage, but they,
Exactly.
and then they have to, make that up in tips, as though
Exactly.
somehow that was their motivation for being a good server.
And the interesting thing is, of course, from the person being served in a restaurant, we're often taught, well, a tip is a gratuity, it's a generosity. And that's not really true. So to give no tip at all when it's part of the person's basic wage is unjust. So there's a matter of justice.
There's where the moral issue comes in.
Yeah,
okay,
so
there's where the moral issue comes in.
In theory, it's just, hey, you don't have to tip at all. There's nothing wrong with saying you're getting no tip. It's a gratuity, it's a generosity. That's not true. The truth is, most wait staff depends on their tips for their living. And so the structure, it's actually a structure that I think is unjust, that we leave people their pay to the whims of customers who don't have to pay them anything.
Yeah, if they chose not to, they could just walk out and stiff their waiter or waitress.
Right. You don't get to, it's the interesting thing is you don't get to pay for your meal, which you feel like. So the owner of the restaurant gets paid either way. Whether or not the wait staff that does the work gets paid is left up to how the patrons feel. And sometimes waitresses often, or waiters, they often get blamed for mistakes, of course, that are not their own.
Right.
That happens in the back kitchen. And even if they do make a mistake. So I personally never tip less than 15%.
Right.
And if it's a cheap place, I always tip 20% because it starts to get, the math is a little bit silly.
Right.
If you go to Steak and Shake and you decide you're going to figure out what $15 is on a $12 bill.
Right.
So
yeah, it's interesting to me in terms of talking about this as a moral issue. I personally, I wish kind of we do what you would don't get mad at me for saying this, everybody, but Europeans do.
Yeah,
because the Europeans basically put this in as just wages. Right. So in other words, you're not expected to leave a gratuity.
Right.
You're just expected to pay the bill, and it's built into that thing. So they're making their wages, whether or not somebody likes them or not.
Right.
And I've never had bad. I mean, let's face it, everybody's had bad service once in a while, but I've never had such bad service that I've really wanted to, really just do some of that. Or if I did, sometimes sometimes I'll even write. If I really had a horrible experience, I'll write a note on the ticket that just basically says, I'm really, I'm leaving you, 10% here or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm saying to you, I usually am a really good tipper,
Yeah.
but I do expect not to have to track you down 6 times for more water or something, and do some of that. So I usually write a note, but I mean, there is again I'm usually hoping it's somebody who's new or was
Right.
needed. Just pay more attention. Just do your job, more for a little bit better for me.
Right.
Because I mean, people tease me all the time because they're just like, oh, we'll get better service because you're with us, all right? And I keep saying, in most of the places I go most of the time, it's not because I'm wearing this.
Right.
It's because I'm a really good tipper.
Oh, that's the secret. We thought
But
it was
again-
your personality all this time.
Yeah, I
Okay.
know. But
Yeah.
let's think about that as a moral act. Should I get better service just because I'm a good tipper? Should I get better service because I wear this? Should I get better service because I smile? Or should I get better service because that's what I'm entitled to as a person who's a patron in a restaurant and another human being on the earth?
Yeah, well,
How do we do that stuff?
most wait staff, the reality though is depending on the kind of, you're probably going to places that are a little bit more high cut than I'm talking about my Steak and Shake experience. So it sounds like you're not hitting Steak and Shake often. However,
Well, I
well,
hit some places that are not. I mean, we have a wide variety here in
All right,
Joplin.
all
I just
right,
want you to
all
know
right.
we've got
I
everything.
believe it.
Yeah.
I was in the Mickey D's today. But their reality might be there might be 12 tables that night, and that's why you didn't see them. Their reality might be, my brother said to me something the other day. You never know what people are going through.
Exactly.
It's
It's true.
and I often think of that in traffic, another everyday situation, getting cut off in traffic, or something, and you don't know. They just had a fight. Their wife just broke up with them. You just don't know. Their kid just got taken by child services. You just don't know, and what people are going through. And I almost always behind every story, behind every instance. Sometimes not. There are people that are just not nice people, but I think especially in the waitstaff situation. Hey, somebody called in sick, you got twice the tables to wait on today. Have fun with that.
Yeah.
And they get the same basic hourly wage, even if there's twice the tables. Now they're supposed to make it up in tips, but if somebody's like, hey, I couldn't find you, then they don't, and that's too bad. So there's every day, when I go to bed at night, I sleep better if I feel like I treated people well.
Well, and I think that to me is the real key to the whole thing, is how do we treat people? And, sometimes I may get lousy service and I still am like, I would hate to be a waiter or a waitress because I think it would be, tough work and always demanding and all those kinds of things. And so sometimes I just am like, okay, what the heck?
Just the patience to serve others.
Exactly.
And you're right, you do get asked to serve in your job. You're on for that. You're on to listen. And that's, I think in our culture, I think those people are put in a difficult situation. They, unlike you, don't have the prestige. There's some sense of, this is a somebody. But most of the time, at the end of the meal,
He obviously doesn't know me very well.
we
but that's
don't
okay.
we don't remember the wait person's name or call them by their name. They're not a somebody. They're something that's doing a job for us.
And that I think we need to guard against in all aspects and in all areas of life.
Yeah.
We can't afford to treat other human beings like just utilities.
There's somebody's daughter. There's somebody's son or mother or husband. So.
And I think, again, so just something simple like that, when we start looking at the act of tipping, in even the way that the whole thing is structured, which I really wish we did it more the European way, frankly. But how do we accomplish that in such a way that we're treating people well and justly all the time? And for us, I think that becomes an issue. It seems something simple, but it is something that we do in terms of it being a moral act. So, at any rate, my guest this morning, Nicholas Lund Mulfacey, who works for the Diocese of Springfield Cape Girardeau. We're talking a little bit about morality and making moral choices in daily life. We just used the example of tipping. We're going to come up with something else for you right after the break. But stick with us. It'll be a short break. This is Faith in Our Hometown, so stick around.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
So again, thanks for sticking with us this morning. Again, my guest, Nicholas Lund Mulfacey, who is from the Diocese of Springfield Cape Girardeau, does all kinds of jobs for us. But But at any rate, Nick, thanks for coming this morning. We've been talking a little bit about, how we make moral decisions in daily life. And we used the example in the first half about, how tipping is really a moral act in so many different ways, and especially how we treat each other. There's another one that we sometimes get confronted with here in Joplin, and that is, what do we do for the person on the street who's looking for a handout? Somebody's holding a sign that says, hungry and will work and all those kinds of things, or whatever the sign happens to be, or just somebody just says, hey buddy, can you give me money for a cup of coffee or whatever, or and again, this one kind of gets me, but it's interesting to see that they test us on a Sunday morning, but now it's become a little bit more in vogue for some of those folks to actually stand outside of a church on a Sunday morning and see what they can rustle up from the people who've been in that church service. What do you think? What are our moral responsibilities there?
Well, I think it's a moral moment to treat that other person like a human being. So the first thing is to affirm the other person's humanity. So this isn't an encounter you chose, typically. You've been approached by someone. And so the first thing is treat them as a responsible, moral actor and a human being. So you look them in the eye, you can shake their hand, you can say, please and thank you in the way you address them. In other words, use respect. So often, so I think that's a base minimum.
Yeah, and I think that it goes with what we were talking about earlier. It's just like, that person's not a panhandler. That person's a person who might happen to be panhandling.
Right, they're a human being,
but they're still a human being.
Right.
And we've got, at least most of us would agree, that we've got some kind of a responsibility to treat other human beings with a certain amount of dignity and respect.
And it's good for you. I mean, I think it's very good for you. There's a lot of evidence that by treating, whether it's, we talked previously, waitstaff, or panhandlers, even pets, when we abuse or treat human beings inhumanly, it's very harmful to the person themselves. So there's a lot of connection to that. How do people treat the least or things they have power over? And the way that warps or shapes our personality. So in those cases, the funnest thing I like to do, if I have time, and this is a great test, is to say, I won't give you money, but you said you're hungry, let's go grab a bite to eat. And to offer, hey, I'm going to go, if it's Sunday morning, to brunch, or I'm going to grab a hot dog, and hey, come on with me. And you'd be amazed at the wisdom and knowledge of people who live on the street. There's a whole newspaper called Streetwise in many cities in the United States, and it's published by the homeless because they see everything and they're always there. And the stories they can tell you and the things they've seen is amazing. So you're going to get a free education. And if they're hungry, they're going to get fed, and you're going to really affirm their humanity.
Right.
Now, the truth is, as often as not, the person says, no, thank you, that's okay, and turns me down, and that's okay too. And of course, you should do whatever you feel comfortable and safe with.
Exactly, and especially safe. And I would say, I always say this to my female staffers and all those kinds of things. It's just like, no, I want to make sure that whatever you choose to do, that there's safety involved and nobody's at risk of any kind.
Absolutely, you should feel safe. I'd also say though, to the best of my knowledge, so there's no higher rate of violent crime by the homeless than there is anybody else. So one of the things I'm concerned about is this fear of the homeless. And I sometimes have said, anytime I generally hear about a multiple murder or somebody hurting others or something, these people aren't homeless. They're, there's something else going on.
And I think that's just an important part to highlight. I just, it's, ever since, I was a kid, is that whole thing, don't pick up hitchhikers, don't do those things. I can do a lot of things now that I didn't do, when I was listening, when I was listening to my mom and dad, but again, I always, if some of that stuff happens and I'm not got the next mass to go to, this, I'm like you, I'm just like, sometimes if I've got the time, I will very much often do it. Or if somebody comes to the door, we'll make somebody, I'll say, hey, look, it's just a policy, we don't give out money.
Right.
But if you need something to eat, well, we can either send them over to our outreach house or whoever happens to be serving that day or whatever, hot meals. But even if they come at a different point in time, I'll just say, hey, but if you're hungry, I'll make you a sandwich real fast. Or, we keep some, we do keep some things in the cabinet.
That's the best thing because it's personal. I've given my lunch before. Now, another option is gift cards. So especially for you or for other institutions, it's like, hey, here's a gift card. You can go to McDonald's, get a cup of coffee or whatever it is. So I'd say generally, though, so I don't think there's anything wrong, first of all. Somebody asks you money, you give them money. Some people would say it's wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Sometimes they say that they're going to use it for, they're just going to use it for alcohol or something else. And at least when I was younger, I'd joke, well, it's probably what I've used it for anyway. Now that I've got all these kids, it's it's not so much. It's more like a donut. But I personally have decided.
I think I'd go for the never mind.
Yeah. So, but I think having a solid rule, so saying, especially as an institution, saying we don't give out cash and being consistent is very important. And I think I personally have decided it's not helpful to people. But I do, even if I say no and they turn other stuff down, or I just don't have time to offer other stuff, I can always say, I'm sorry, I don't have anything to give you. But I wish you the best, or something. I can always say something affirming, something positive. And most of the time, they respond positively back. I mean, the bottom line is they're other human beings. Even if they're distressed or in a bad situation, even if, and let's be honest, we don't have to be sort of naive about it, is that, somebody's giving you a line or a scam. Not every time somebody needs bus fare. It's possible some of those times they may not actually need bus fare. And I don't care. I think it's fine. I'm still going to treat them as a human person with respect.
Well, and I think that that's part of the key. Again, you said a couple key things as far as I'm concerned, like look people in the eye, shake their hand. Really, I think that sometimes people out of, again, fear, sometimes they'll just look down and they won't make, they'll just like walk past and pretend the person didn't exist. And I just try to, especially with younger students and things like that, to say, no, let's just go ahead and look at everybody and smile and wish them a good day, do those things.
You don't have to be afraid,
most of the time
you can talk. And on the other hand, I've had some profound experiences. There's a homeless guy. When I was in college, I went cross country. I went to this dance with this girl. There's a beautiful little Italian girl there. And she shot me down at this dance, and I was upset, and I walked out in downtown Chicago, and this homeless guy came up to me, and he's like, oh, man, I got a wife, kids to feed. Could you spare a dime? And I said to him, oh, at least you got a wife and kids. Like, let me tell you what just happened to me. And he's like, well, he said, and then he says to me, well, man, God, he said, God will take care of us. And I said, well, I hope so. And he said, God always takes care of you. You remember that.
Wow.
And then he
there, bang.
Yeah, and then he turned around the corner and was gone. It was like, whoa. So so I've met people who are homeless who called me to faith. There's a homeless guy, PhD in history. He was outside one of the bars I went to in college. Same guy, always there. And one day I stepped to talk to him, and it's like he's telling me this, and I'm thinking, yeah, right. And then it's like, oh no, wait, he knew everything. It was amazing. So you can't just make assumptions about who these people are or their faith. Here this guy got no money from me, the first story, and he was completely genuine and kind of telling me, like, what are you talking about? Like, hope. What's up with you? And that second case, too, this guy was really had something. So in terms of education and history, if you have people in your family who are mentally ill, the difference between people who are mentally ill or just homeless is often family. It's people taking care of them.
Yeah. I'm going to say, and I wish I could remember which church it was, but I was talking with somebody, and they were talking about their youth group, and so their youth group is kind of a project to help be more humane to some of the homeless or people who might be asking for a handout. Is they're in their youth group, they just kind of made this pact that they were all going to pack some baggies and put them in the car, and in the baggie were some power bars and some cracked cheese and crackers and stuff like that. And so they had that stuff ready so that if anybody did come, they'd have something to hand them. Something just to say, really sorry, I don't give out cash. But the other thing is that I'm going to also say to some of the local places that know where Salvation Army is or the Outreach House or some of those things, know when they serve their meals, because again, if folks come in the door, you can just look at them and say, hey, we don't give out food, we don't give out, money, but
Right.
we can feed you. And
Yes.
so if you want to go down the block,
Right.
there you go.
Right.
You can do that and know them where those are and the certain days. We've been talking about how to, to do specific things. But there's another one little issue that we've just got a couple minutes to talk about a little bit here. But how do we respond to just people in need in general? How do we do some of those things? I think that's another mark that marks us out as compassionate. So people who we would notice just need an ear. Maybe they don't have any monetary needs or anything, but they need time from somebody to just listen to them. Sometimes the elderly need that.
Yes.
Sometimes it's just noticing that somebody looks down and just say, instead of just walking right past and not making any eye contact, to look at them and say, hey, how's your day going? And it's just like, well, you looked a little sad, so I was just wondering, were you okay?
Yeah.
Because sometimes they'll just say, I'm fine.
Right.
But when we sometimes scratch the surface, we get into a little bit more. So I think it's kind of important that we also just have our antennae up as compassionate people.
Yeah.
So just know we're sharing the earth with some of these other people.
Well, there's opportunities there to help others. You just pay attention to. I'm always amazed. People do feel you help them by listening to them. And
it's one of the few things we can do for as human being to human being.
Yeah, I'm just always really impressed with how much that touches people, and I haven't done anything. I've just managed to shut up, which isn't that easy, but sometimes for me. But I just listen.
I'm sorry. I could say the
and
same
I bump
thing.
into them, and they, but I just paid attention enough to know, hey, there was something for me to do there.
Yeah. Well, my guest this morning has been Nicholas Lund Malfasi from the Diocese of Springfield Cape Girardeau. We've been talking about how to treat each other in terms of a moral life and acting. So we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute to wrap up, so don't go away.
The SANE program, or Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner program, is a program established to provide a coordinated, specialized care to patients or women or men who've been the victim of sexual assault.
The SANE program is really designed to be a collaborative community response to sexual assault.
It's really important to make sure that it's not just the report or the forensic, but they get all of the testing that might be needed for their health.
It's also important to know that you don't need to know if you want to press charges or not. We don't get law enforcement involved unless you request it.
I just want to express to the victim that it is never your fault. You always have the right to say no, and that it's your body. So if you say yes one time, it doesn't mean every time.
I think it's important that sexual assault victims remember they've been victims of a crime, and crime victims do not pay for those services.
Well, again, thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning here at Faith in Our Hometown. We really are glad that you're watching. Today we were talking about living a moral life, and what's it like in the regular, everyday, simple acts like going out to eat and how we treat the wait staff. Other moments where we treat somebody who might happen to be on the street asking for a little help or a little money or a little cash or whatever. But the bottom line is that what we really need to do, if I think we're going to engage the world, a human being to human being, is never to treat any of those folks like objects, never to treat any of those folks like they're pariahs, but to really just acknowledge their humanity, even if they're engaged in behavior we don't happen to like. At a given point in time, or even if it's an inconvenience. How do we continue to look to those people and treat them truly like human beings? Because I think that that's something we all, regardless of our religious belief or practice, we could do right here in our greater area. So join us next week for Faith in Our Hometown. We're glad you've joined us. God bless and have a great week.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.